We go back to 2009 for another retro review. From the outer shipping carton we can see that this is a Grove model, and looking at the end of the carton it's TWH model 053A, and it's yellow.
Let's weigh it up.
It flies onto the weighbridge and comes in at 4 pounds 9 ounces, which is just over 2 kilograms. The first thing to do is to remove the box from the inside of the shipping carton, and to do that we'll go for some end tipping. And out comes the brightly coloured Grove branded box. We can see some line drawings of the 5-axle crane that's inside, and on the other side is a photo of the crane, and it's the GMK 5110-1, also known as the 5135 in the US. Underneath we see the Manitowoc Model Shop and the TWH logo. Pulling out the inside, the first thing we see is a brochure, and we'll have a quick look at that in a moment. And if we lift the lid, we see the model, and it's covered with a protective wrapping. There are also a few parts. Included with the model is a marketing brochure for the real crane, which is nice enough, but there's no information about the model. This is how the model comes out of the box, and we'll start by putting the crane in a transport mode, so to do that we need to remove the counterweight. The cheek weights are easily removed because they just lift off, but the main counterweight is slightly different because it's screwed on underneath. So it's time to get the screwdriver out and undo a couple of screws, and then the whole block can be removed. We can then reset the crane into its travelling position. But wait, there's more to do because this model does require some mirrors to be fitted. And they are easy enough just to press in, with the slightly unusual one being the very long mirror that comes out over the front of the cab. There is another mirror that fits to the side of the crane, but this would normally be folded in for transport. The last thing to fit for this transport mode is the lattice fly jib, and you can rest it in place on a couple of supports, and to secure it there are a couple of pins. One gets put in at the back, and after you've located that there's one to go in at the front. And these are good because it means you can raise the boom without the fly jib falling off.
Let's weigh it up again.
The crane flies itself onto the weighbridge, and it's nearly 2 pounds 14 ounces, or 1.3 kilograms. We start underneath, and as you would expect from a TWH model, it is very detailed. There are various tanks, and there are various hoses which add detail to the chassis. The driven axles all have their own transfer boxes and differentials, and overall the chassis does have a busy and detailed appearance. The tyres have a decent tread pattern. The curved shape of the driving cab is modelled well. There's a highlighted door handle, and there are the small headlights typical of the real crane, and the Grove name appears on the windscreen, and there are beacon lights on the roof. There's a tiny graphic on the cab, and there are some nicely finished textured surfaces. The textured surface continues along the deck edge, and there's a nice rubber skirt above the wheels. The crane cab has got metal grab rails, and there are more small graphics to add detail. The high level of detail also continues behind the cab. The carrier deck has some cast-in ladder detailing. At the back of the crane, the Grove name is nicely embossed and painted, and there are a pair of beacon light stalks. The back of the carrier has a spare wheel and wheel chocks. The side of the boom has a couple of spooling drums, and it's nice that one of them is wound with string. At the back of the crane there is a mirror which is permanently folded down, and that would normally be raised when the crane is operating. There are hydraulic hoses running to the winch motor, and there are some nicely finished surfaces on the bodywork. The lattice fly jib is a nicely made piece of metalwork, and it has metal sheaves. The two-stage outrigger beam is cast as a single piece, and that does mean that the extension is short. The pistons have smooth faces. Behind the driving cab, the equipment is nicely detailed and there's some very fine meshwork. And you can see the diamond-plated walking surfaces and the chromed exhaust. A nice touch is the hydraulic hoses that run to the slewing mechanism and the main boom ram. We go back underneath the Grove and all of the wheels spin individually, and there is linked steering on the front and rear pairs of axles. However, the middle axle doesn't steer, so you can't replicate crab steering, but the axles do have sprung suspension, and that works very well. Moving out onto the Cranes etc. test track, and the Grove is reasonably free rolling. But does it like to turn a corner? Well, we've set the steering, so let's find out. And it seems to be nice and smooth. While we're here, let's just test out the suspension. And it can certainly rock and roll. We've arrived on site on the desktop, so let's set the crane up. The outrigger beams pull out and you can spin the pads down. And when we're fully stable, we can raise the boom. The ram relies on friction to hold a pose, but it's not very stiff, so you need a steep angle. And you can pose the crane with self-ballasting, and it's nice to see that all of the slabs are separate parts. As we saw before, the counterweight has to be screwed on, but if you need the cheek weights, you can just drop them on. Extending the telescopic boom is done in the usual way, but the sections can only be locked at full extension. Rotating the crane works smoothly enough, and another piece of functionality is the tilting cab. To operate the winch, you have to turn the drum manually, so it's not something that you'd want to do for very long. This Grove crane was a high quality model when it was introduced in 2009. It had much of TWH Collectibles' trademark high level of detail, and the level of functionality was very good for its time. The metal content is very high, and there are plenty of different ways to pose the model. Overall, at the time it was first reviewed, it was rated as very good.